Hey, what if I told you that a tiny 1-degree mistake could mean the difference between getting everything right and, well, total disaster? We're going to jump into a fascinating sermon that uses this exact idea to break down the fate of an ancient empire. Let's get right into it. So, I want you to imagine you're a pilot. You're at takeoff, ready to go. But your navigation, it's off by just 1 single degree. I mean, it feels like nothing, right? At that very moment, you can barely even see the difference in your flight path. But, here's the really dangerous thing about those tiny errors. They add up over time. The sermon we're looking at today uses this perfect example. If you fly for thousands of miles with that 1-degree error, you are not going to end up where you planned. You might be aiming for one city, but without making a correction, you could literally land in another one hundreds of miles away. That tiny, tiny deviation at the start creates this massive gap by the end of the journey. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. This sermon takes that exact same flight analogy and applies it to the history of two ancient kingdoms. The argument is that the entire destiny of a nation was basically sealed by a similar 1-degree spiritual error that was made right at the very beginning. Okay, so let's zoom in on that exact moment, that initial split, that 1-degree error that ended up sending two kingdoms down two completely different roads. So after the famous King Solomon, the whole nation of Israel just fractures. It splits in two. You've got the northern kingdom, which is called Israel, and it's led by this guy Jeroboam, and then you have the southern kingdom, Judah, which stays loyal to Solomon's son. But here's the thing. The sermon insists this wasn't just some political disagreement. No, this was a spiritual fork in the road. And boom, here it is. This is that 1-degree error. The North's very first king, Jeroboam, he gets paranoid. He's worried that if his people keep traveling south to the main temple in Jerusalem, they might switch their loyalty back. So purely for political reasons, to hold on to his power, he sets up 2 golden calves in his own kingdom for people to worship. He changed a fundamental command just to make his life easier, and in doing that, he tilted the entire kingdom's trajectory just slightly off course. So what happens to a kingdom that's literally founded on this kind of compromise? Well, as we're about to see, it kicks off a devastating and repeating cycle. And wow, the consequences were immediate, and they were violent. Jeroboam's son, Nadab, he keeps up his dad's sinful policies, but he only lasts 2 years before he's assassinated. And the guy who assassinates him, Baasha, then goes on a rampage and systematically wipes out Jeroboam's entire family. The sermon calls this rebellion DNA. I mean, think about that. The kingdom was born from a rebellion, and it just kept rebelling against itself, tearing itself apart from the inside out. And this quote just nails the problem, doesn't it? The sermon likens it to a rocket launched at the wrong angle. If you don't make an immediate course correction, its own momentum, its inertia, just carries it further and further away from its target. The North was totally trapped by this. Its first mistake set a course that king after king just followed, one after another, straight into destruction. But wait, what about the other kingdom, the South? You might think this is going to be the story of the good guys, right? But it's actually way more complicated and way more interesting than that. Okay, so check this out. This is the crucial part. The Southern Kingdom wasn't perfect either, not even close. Their king at the time, a guy named Abijam, is described in almost the exact same way as the North's bad king. Both of them were just walking in the sinful footsteps of their fathers. So if both kings were messing up, why was one guy's family line violently cut off while the other one was allowed to keep going? What on earth was the difference? This, right here, is where the sermon introduces this really beautiful and powerful idea, the lamp. Now, we're not talking about a physical lamp. It's a symbol. It represents God's unbreakable promise to the South's founding king, David. It stands for a signal of grace, a constant, ever-present opportunity to make a course correction and get back on track. And the text itself spells this out for us. It says that even though the current king was failing, God gave him a lamp in Jerusalem. And listen to this part, for David's sake. Did you catch that? It had nothing to do with the current king's performance. It was all about honoring a promise made to a past king. This lamp was a guarantee that the family line and the hope for a fresh start was not going to be snuffed out. And that is the absolute key to understanding the whole thing. This chance to get back on course, it wasn't earned. The Southern king absolutely did not deserve it based on his actions. It was a totally unmerited gift. A signal of grace, shining in the darkness, basically reminding them of their original flight path and giving them a chance to turn back. So let's bring this all home. When you put these two diverging paths side by side, what's the big takeaway here? Well, it all comes down to the incredible power of course correction. I mean, just look at the journey. They both start in the same place. Then the North makes that tiny deviation, that 1-degree error, and it just gets locked into this destructive momentum. The South also deviates. It also messes up big time, but it's given this lamp, this signal of grace that offers a constant chance to reorient itself, to kind of adjust its spiritual GPS and get back on the right path. So when you boil it all down, the critical point isn't that one kingdom was perfect and the other was evil. Not at all. The real defining difference was that one kingdom had a built-in chance to fix its mistakes, a promise, a light, an opportunity to correct its course, while the other was just flying further and further into the darkness with no way back. And that kind of leaves us with a pretty fascinating question for ourselves, doesn't it? In our own lives, when we find ourselves drifting off course, what is our lamp? What's that promise or that core value or maybe that relationship that acts as our signal of grace, the thing that reminds us of our true destination and gives us the chance to turn back? It's a really powerful idea to think about.